fan fret basses, the final verdict. Why don't I talk much about slap bass? And what made me pick bass over guitar? Because it's not a consolation prize. Metal Bass Monday. So a lot of updates this week in my ever-expanding takeover of the metal bass internet. I've joined a couple new platforms, and as per your request, I've set up Subscribestar and Patreon. Two places where there's going to be a lot of different content. I'm going to offer up a lot of different things and some contributions to thank you for being supporters. And some stuff that just isn't right for YouTube, or I feel like I need to have a larger format with people who are really focused on the things I can offer there. So Subscribestar, I feel, is kind of the better one of the two, but whichever one you're comfortable with, I recommend Subscribestar, but you can use Patreon as well. There's going to be 3 levels, and the base level is at $2 and gives you access to the Discord server, and every once in a while I'll be throwing some freebies in there and, giving away some things just because, I love you guys. Second level is Bass Lord at $5, and that's going to get you access to some live streams, behind the scenes stuff, voting on future episodes and lessons, content. Check out the links. It goes into full detail with everything you get. And then there's a $10 level, which is Bass God, of course. And that's going to have a lot of things like my more long-form videos where I go into deep topics that cover everything from creativity and more long-form discussions that I've been wanting to do, but it's hard to kind of title and get into a thumbnail image exactly everything I'm covering. But if you get what we're trying to do here with the channel and everything, I think this content will really make a difference for you. It's good stuff, and it's going to be exclusive to those people. So you'll also have some merchandise that'll be coming out at discounted rates for all members, of course, and all kinds of cool things. Lessons I'm going to toss out once in a while that stack on top of the ones I'm going to do here. So really expanded content and a lot of fun stuff. So thank you so much for everybody who actually requested this. That really took me back, and I'm flattered and really appreciate all the support. All the links are below. And on top of that, I'm also on 2 other platforms to continue some of the content that you've requested that it's just getting hard to do here on YouTube and things. And you can find me at BitChute, and you can also find me at Library, spelled LBRY, links down below. But you can find all the same content from my channels over there, and I'm also going to be expanding to another network called Locals. So whichever one seems to fit what you're on or places you might want to go, I want to offer as many options as possible so that you can find me on other platforms you visit or ones you enjoy the most, and maybe I'll trim it down at some point to the ones that I get feedback from you that are the ones you really enjoy the most. So I'll look forward to seeing you at all those other places, and the domination continues. So, topic number 1. So a couple episodes back, we talked about fan fret basses and whether they were kind of a gimmick or how I felt about them and whether I thought they were going to become a viable thing. And I think we came up with a pretty definitive decision that they aren't a gimmick and offer some real advantages. So what I wanted to do was get one in hand and show you, after I had sat with it for a little bit, what I thought of it. And since I'm looking at kind of pursuing some basses that have these options, why I'm making that decision, and hopefully clear up any thoughts that you guys may have. And again, if you have questions about the fan frets and things that you'd like me to address specifically to this instrument, hit me down below. I'll do my best to answer. Now, I also wanted to get something with the longest scale potential. This one is a 37 through 34, meaning that the top end here is at 37 and it winds up at 34 across the top strings. So that's about as long as I've seen them. I believe its Dingwall is about the same scale. And when I place, I can definitely feel there's an extended range going on here. It definitely feels longer than a 34. You can feel it's different from a 35 scale. I have a 36 scale Schecter that I've shown in other episodes. It feels about the same to me with that. I think because of the fan fret, it gives a bit more of a relaxed wrist kind of thing going on, so I don't notice that change as much. It does feel larger. It doesn't feel unusable, at least not to me. One of the things I did notice that's a strange thing and took me a little bit to get comfortable with or to acknowledge is that because you have the angled nut here, when I'm in first position, my hand does go over it if I play it normally. Not all the time. If I actually get well into position, I don't touch it. But sometimes, like if I just sit how I normally would with the bass or I'm muting something down below, that's when I kind of feel it. So that's a kind of an important thing to make sure if you're going to get something that it's got a little bit of quality to it and this is rounded off. Because if you have a cheaper low-end one or one with a nut that's just not polished off, I think that's going to be a major thing that, that could dig into your hand really quickly. So maintaining good hand posture and making sure that's been done right are going to be the key to getting that kind of dialed in and not something you're going to brutalize yourself with. As far as just general playability, when I'm not looking, it doesn't feel any different. It genuinely doesn't. I've sat here and, done chords and, tried different, configurations. It really doesn't feel different. It's only when I kind of look at it that it seems a little odd. And when you even look at it from top down, because you don't see the full angle, you just see the tang of the fret on the very edge, it really doesn't even look to me like I'm playing something different. One thing that I mentioned in the earlier episode when we talked about it before is that for me, actually on top, one technique like tapping actually feels a little more natural because the frets are actually how my hand rests rather than being straight up and down where I'm forced to go a little more like this as I move up. This lets me kind of stay in position. And so that's actually a little more comfortable. I tried, like I said, chording. I tried just about everything, even harmonics. Still kind of ring out fairly well. The only thing that I thought was a little bit of a trade-off was if I did tapping that was a bit more orchestral, the kind of piano style tapping, that type of thing, is this takes a little getting used to there because now my hand feels more crowded. If I were playing on a normal bass, that fret would actually feel like it's about here, whereas I actually intend to hit the one there. So it pulls forward a bit. My hand feels like I have to play a little tighter than I'm used to. But that was the only technique I could feel a real difference or need to modify myself with. So I don't think that's that big a trade-off to have to make. It could feel, maybe a little strange as I got more into it. I still have to explore it and everything. But so far, I think the final verdict is there's very little modification really needed. Some of the stuff that I've seen, people talk about with playing in the high range and it, affecting their hand position and stuff, I'm not seeing it. Not saying they're wrong, but I, genuinely, I can sit here and play my scales as I would normal kind of have the muscle memory going, and it's just not there. It doesn't really feel that different. I only occasionally feel like I'm bumping up against the fret a little more than I usually would in any given position. So, got one in hand, thought I'd show that to you, and if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask about specific techniques or things, or I can sit and explore it a little further, feel free. But I think the final verdict is it's really a minimal adjustment to make, and most of it's kind of psychological, except for, like I said, the more piano-style tapping. I couldn't come up with anything that affected me so much that within about a minute I wasn't kind of able to slide into where I needed to be and be right back in the comfort zone. So fan frets, not a big adjustment, not a gimmick, something you may want to consider. And if your bass doesn't have fan frets, I don't know that there's that huge an advantage if you have a bass that you really love to move to it. A great bass without fan frets isn't a reason to disqualify it, but if you're on the fence and you see a great bass that does have them, I think it's worth considering and kind of getting off the fence and going, this is a real option. It's really not that big a change. So, next topic. Because it sucks. Next question. No. Since I'm recording something with this bass later on, jumping back to the trusty 36 scale Schecter. But the reason that I've kind of shied away from slap bass was a number of reasons. I can play slap a little bit. I'm not definitely at the caliber of a number of players who are the people who are going to be the go-to for this. But I'm probably going to be experimenting with it a little more, and these are the reasons why I don't do it or address it as much as some others. When I first had an interest in slap bass, was kind of early on when it was making its entrance into rock. And it was kind of like Chili Peppers, there was a little bit in Faith No More, but there was a whole thing called the funk metal movement. There was this big crossover happening with, like jazz and funk kind of making inroads with metal, where you had the more progressive and even jazzier things getting into like Dream Theater and, Watchtower and bands like that. And then you had the funk guys coming out, most of it driven by like Chili Peppers, Faith No More, that type of thing. And it quickly got saturated. It just, everybody on earth started doing their one little, slap lick in the middle of a song. And it just became lame. You would see a guy who would just, do some really... And then all of a sudden just look around waiting for his applause because he did something so different in metal. And it was, I don't know, it just seemed like everybody jumped on the bandwagon and it really turned me off. And even though I felt like it was something interesting I might want to explore a little more, just the fact that it was just, the flavor of the week kind of turned me off of it. I only heard one or two examples in metal too at that time that I thought were kind of interesting. Something like what Troy Gregory did on the intro to No More Fun from Flotsam and Jetsam. That was really cool. But most of it came across, sounding like bands like Mordred or Mind Funk and stuff like that. I just really didn't have any interest. Then it kind of went away a little bit. You still had guys, maybe that brought it back later a little bit, like Fieldy and things like that. Still didn't interest me that much, but it didn't saturate. So I kind of started getting an interest in, could I do something more interesting with it? And I learned a little bit of it. And I also started seeing more potential with guys like, and I've referenced him before on the channel, still recommend him, fantastic bassist and friend Dale Titus, Everything Bass channel, tons of lessons. If you're not checking it out, you're missing out completely. But anyway, really kind of getting into it, it started to take shape and I had a few ideas, but then I started to see it come back with a lot of the prog and gent stuff. And honestly, the way it's getting used there too, it's not inspiring to me. It seems like kind of a rehash of the same old. I find the way that it's doing is kind of predictable, but it's just my vibe on it. You may feel different. No reason to have to come to blows over it. I just still didn't find it that inspiring. And one promise I kind of had made to myself as far as slap is that I really wouldn't do it even if I practiced it in a recording somewhere or something unless I felt I had something new to offer, because it's just kind of been overdone. I do have some ideas, and I'm starting to work it a little bit more into some ideas, so maybe I'll explore it here on the channel. But until I can do something I really think is a little different or interesting, I probably won't showcase it that much. So that's why I haven't done that much slap bass stuff. I really only have an interest in things where I feel like I can put some personality or try and show something a little different, or it just naturally fits me. The last part of it is in the middle of all this slap bass madness, I was kind of reminded of the great John Entwistle. There was a reason they called him Thunderfingers, and I'm going to info card a bass solo up there, but the places where you see me do something that's the closest to something like slap bass is where I'm actually using my finger more to do it, kind of thing. And, I can get same type of vibe, but to me, I can do this, then immediately move into tapping pieces with it and keep my fingerstyle going with very minimal transition. And seeing Entwistle, it just seemed a bit more rock than kind of, immediately having to concede to a funkish sound. So I preferred that one. That's the one that's kind of my replacement for slap bass. And it achieves a lot of the same effect. So I've kind of been able to insert that technique in, and it served its purpose, but I'm going to see if I can branch out a little bit and bring some new ideas to the table. But in a nutshell, that's why you don't see a lot of slapping the bass on this channel, and there probably won't be a ton of it. Next topic. So for the final topic, I wanted to talk about something I think a lot of bass players get hit with. And please tell me your stories below. I'd love to hear them. But I don't know how many times I've been asked, why did you pick up bass instead of guitar? So often it's seen as like a consolation prize, or what you can only do because you weren't good enough to play guitar, or all these idiotic ideas. And a lot of people just don't get the idea that someone would want to start on bass, or that would be their preferred instrument. And I can remember a profound moment when that decision was made for me once and for all. And I figured I'd share it with you and see if you have the same kind of story or how you came to it. It's actually two pieces, but one was kind of a revelation about what seemed to fit me, and then the other was what kind of impact I wanted to have musically. One of the first things that happened was I actually picked up a guitar when I was about 11 years old. I had a Gibson SG copy, and I played it, and I was really into music. I was already kind of a metalhead even by that age. But it didn't give me something that made me want to pursue it that hard. In according with all my other interests, I was into drawing a lot and things like that. And it was just something else to do. It seemed like something that I didn't have the instinct that I would attain a high level of ability with it, because it just didn't seem instinctual to me. Probably just laziness on my part. So I put it down for a while, but I still had the drive musically to do something. A few years later, around 15 years old, I was actually dating a young lady, and she had a cousin who had a bass. And he showed it to me and handed it to me, and I sat and got my hands on it and started playing it. And he asked me, "Oh, it's cool. How long have you been playing?" And I'd never touched a bass in my life. And I said, "It's the first time." And he goes, "You approach it like you kind of know what you're doing." And he was right, that it just felt right to me, that there was something about it that I went, this is right, that at least I had some kind of connection to it. And that got me thinking about it. And then there was the magic musical moment. Until then, I had favorites. I loved Steve Harris, I loved Bob Daisley, I loved Geezer Butler, Dave Ellefson, all these guys, and I was a really big fan of them, but I was also a fan of the guitar players. And I recognized bass better than most people, but I loved all the different instruments, and I loved the vocalists. I didn't assign one more than the other at that point. Then I heard a song, and this moment, and I'll card this one up here, was the song Unchained from Van Halen. Of course, Van Halen, legendary guitar player, Van Halen, legendary band. Eddie Van Halen comes in with a detuned, probably one of his most metal riffs ever, and just starts riffing in with no accompaniment from the band. And what an amazing classic riff, just aggressive and vicious. And you hear the drum build up, and then a slide, the bass hits, and it's almost as if he blows Eddie out into the audience or something. The impact of Michael Anthony hitting with one note destroys Eddie Van Halen's playing. And I was just blown away. The impact of him with one note, Eddie with all these other notes just could not hold up against the absolute impact of Michael Anthony pounding and pulse playing on that one note. I just looked at it and was stunned. It was like the audio version of the beginning of, Lord of the Rings, when Sauron comes out and just waves that mace and just clears the entire valley of all the enemies. It was just absolute destruction on one note. And I just went, I want to do that. I want to be able to hit one note and absolutely destroy an amphitheater. That just blew me away. I couldn't believe how much impact that instrument could have with one note. And I went, that's it. Decision made. I got to do that. So even though I didn't draw a ton of influence later from Van Halen or songwriting-wise or anything else, that song and that specific example was a deciding factor. It was an epiphany moment that this was the path for me. That this low-range destroyer of worlds commanded such power, I had to be able to be able to do that myself. So that was what brought me to it. And there's actually an addendum to that one, because I somewhat had that same moment later with another song that changed my sound. I had early on a much more round, and because I wanted that impact that I heard in that sound, I imitated it. And it was a very, just a very heavy, low end, not a lot of top end, very warm, punchy sound. And I thought that was what I needed to be able to have that destructive impact. Then, as I got deeper into thrash and metal and stuff like that, the Under the Influence album from Overkill came out. And there was, again, a specific moment just like this in the song Drunken Wisdom, and I'll tag that up there. There's after the kind of classical style intro, there's this really chugging, massive riff going on, and you're just like, that's so heavy. Yeah, no. As soon as the bass comes in, it does the same thing. It completely pulls a Michael Anthony, and it's just like hearing Godzilla come in from the side of the speakers and just destroy the guitar. The guitar almost becomes irrelevant to that riff. And Dee Dee Verney's bass sound was so heavy, and it just hit me, and I went, he just dominated the entire mix. And I went, wait a minute, you could do that with like treble and aggression? Oh, I got to rethink this whole thing. So now I wanted to have that same impact, and I found out you could, while also being really gritty and driving through the center of things and actually competing with the guitars in their own range. And that was the second mind blower. So that kind of, Van Halen set me on the course of the impact I wanted to have, and Overkill's Drunken Wisdom set me on I also want to be this audible, and I want to be as present as the other instruments. So those were kind of my epiphany moments. Those were the things where I went, I want to choose bass over guitar. It's not a consolation prize for me. It's not because I'm not a good enough guitar player. I want to play something simple. It's because the impact of what it was capable of so inspired me that was my first choice, not my second. So what brought you? Why, since so many people ask it, why did you pick bass over guitar? I'd be fascinated to hear other people's stories and how it came about. And, did you maybe start on guitar and then you were surprised how much more you liked it? Or was it a consolation prize at first and eventually you grew to love it? Either way, you're here now. So how you got here doesn't matter. But hit me up in the comments below, and again, thank you so much for watching and getting the channel to this point. And the subscribers are starting to roll in fast and furious at this point, and I'm truly grateful. I hope you'll join me on the other channels, and that you will go ahead and become a patron at Subscribestar or Patreon. And please like, subscribe, and share. It really helps the channel out. And the more I can expand out, the more content I can duplicate and create and be able to give you guys back as much as you've given me, honestly, because this has been fantastic watching this grow and meeting other players and talking with you and making new friends, which I consider every one of you. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks as always for coming in. I'll see you somewhere else on one of those links. Take care. See you next time.